Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone had a happy Thanksgiving. Today, I have a terrifying lineup of subscriber encounters from Ohio. Before we get into that, though, a couple links I'd like to share with you. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch store to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Those links are in the description below. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? Now, a while back when I started this channel, I started to compile all of my subscribers' encounters that they sent to me. And I started to realize that a lot of these encounters, countrywide and worldwide, but the majority of them were coming from two states in particular, Ohio and Pennsylvania. And then I just kept, compiling the encounters. And it seemed to me, just to me, that the most disturbing ones came from those two states. Well, today I'm going to share with you some subscriber encounters from Ohio. Jeff, I'd like to start with where I live and grew up. Here in a little town of Lucasville, Ohio, way back in the hills. I was at least 8 years old and always liked to run through the woods and just enjoy nature. One afternoon, say about dusk, I was out in the yard sitting in the grass playing with my dolls, and I got this strange feeling that something was not right. I heard no birds, no frogs, nothing. It was silent, and I felt like I was being watched. I glanced round and as frantically trying to spot what it may be, and then it happened. I saw at the edge of the woods, on a hill, what looked like a dog with no eyes and no nose, just teeth, and black holes where its eyes should have been. It growled viciously at me. I froze and suddenly jumped up and ran screaming to my house. Told my dad, and when we went to look, it was gone. I never saw it again. Not so plain anyway. At night sometimes I can tell, looking out the windows at the woods, and see red glowing eyes staring back at me, and its horrible growl when the wind blows. So if you ever come, don't go outside at night. Second encounter, like I said, we lived in this hollow most of my life. There was supposed to be a curse on it. People had been murdered there. Spooky things always happened. Animals that were buried, they were seen after they died. CB, my brother's dog, it died, and late at night we could hear him whine and howl. Sometimes it was like he was at the foot of our beds. And then it went from howls to growls. Late one night, our mom was working in town. It was just me and my brothers. The light were out. We were almost asleep when we heard footsteps coming toward the door to the house and growling beginning. My big brother grabs the gun and I start to cry. It hit the door. Boom! I screamed. Boom again. My older brother took me in the other room and shut the door. And Mark, my oldest brother, kicked the door open and began firing the gun up in the air. It echoed through the night. And we glanced out the window to see what was happening and saw a creature run to the edge of the woods and glare back. Its eyes glowed red. It let out this horrific howl and ran off into the night. We never spoke of it again or saw it again, but we know it's still out there, watching and waiting. Hey Jeff, my name is Dan, last name redacted. I'll be the first to tell you my full name because I know what happened and what I saw that day. And if I get crap for it, I don't care. I'm telling you this. 5 days after it happened, it's still fresh in my head. You know, when you wake up from a vivid dream with lots of detail, and then like an hour later you go to tell someone and it slowly fades away? Well, anyway, here's my encounter. The day was Wednesday, February 12th, 2020. I was coming home from work that evening, and my drive takes me about an hour to get home. I work near Columbus, Ohio, and live in Evansville. So, after I leave the big city and travel through the smaller towns, I'm left with about a good 30 to 40 minutes of nothing but back road and farmland. They're all full of woods and flat farmland, so anyway, right as I was entering this last part of my way home, I turned off the highway and started toward a rural part. I'm listening to some Suicide Boys and de-stressing about my day when all of a sudden I had a really bad feeling come over me. I got really nervous and looked in my rearview mirror, thinking that a cop may be nearby or sitting by the road. I'm nervous because I'm currently driving with a suspended license. So I immediately slowed down a little and looked down at my gauges to check if everything was good. All right, I thought, nothing wrong with the inside of the car, so due to my past experiences, I look for the nearest driveway to stop and check and see if my tires are going flat. I pulled into what looked to be a state park entrance with woods on the side. I pulled onto the other side of the road. It was flat, grassy field. I get out, checking my car over tire by tire, making sure the lights are all working, and so on. So far, so good, I told myself. I shrug my shoulders, happy nothing's wrong. I go back around to the driver's side and get in. Then, to the left side of me, out of the corner of my eye, I catch movement. I turn my head toward the direction and had to squint to make sure I really did see something. The area for about 30 seconds to make sure I wasn't just seeing things. Then all of a sudden, I see this huge black mass moving around in the field. From my standpoint, it looked like a big black bull. Dang, that thing must be a prize winning bull, I thought. Maybe it got loose from a nearby field. It wouldn't be too neighborly of me to let it get away. So, me being a careful type, I open my trunk and get out my aluminum baseball bat just in case it wants to be brave. I know how to herd cattle, for my family in Kentucky raised them, and I've been around them my entire life. So I know how bulls can be. They're very unpredictable. As I start walking toward the bull, I'm thinking to myself, do I really need to do this? Why am I doing this? Well, to answer both my questions, I was raised to look out for your fellow neighbors. Beside that, the bull had to be worth a lot. So I continue to walk slowly and carefully to not spook it and cause it to charge me. I relax my breathing and keep a tight grip on the bat and continue to walk towards this bull. So I'm about 100 yards away from it, and all of a sudden a putrid, horrid stench hits my nose and choked me. I stopped, stunned by the smell, and coughed in response to it. And at that moment, what I thought was a bull turned around and looked right at me. My breath left my body, and my eyes widened. I felt the strength leave my body. It had beady yellow eyes, about 6-inch pointed black ears, and stained yellow teeth. Its gums glistened in the light with saliva. Oh my God, I said to myself, still not believing what I'm seeing. Our eyes locked the whole time, and the world stood still. Time stopped. All I heard was my heartbeat and a low rumbled growl that this wolf-like creature let out. This is a Dogman, I said to myself. It has to be this thing, and it's as big as a cow. I suddenly remembered my schooling, as in do not make eye contact with a predator, as they may see it as a challenge. I bowed my head, held my arms, showing I'm backing off. And I am no threat, all the while keeping my eyes on it to make sure it stays where it's at. I noticed it raised its hind legs to urinate. Great, I said. I'm in its territory, even more of a reason to get the heck out of here. I must have been walking for what seemed like 5 minutes, thinking, I'm almost to my car, and I realize I've only taken 20 steps back, making no progress. I'm still looking toward the wolf, its eyes still fixed on me, like it's waiting for me to make a threatening move. My plan was to just ease back to the car and get the heck out of here in one piece. Then all of a sudden, as if karma decides to show up and give me the biggest FU without a warning, I let out the biggest sneeze. And as soon as I jerked my head back to see the wolf already charging toward me, my stomach dropped, my skin went clammy. Shoot, I thought, I'm gonna die here being skinned like a cow. Quick thinking, I knew I would not make it back to the car, and if I did, what would it do to protect me from this thing? So I decided right then and there, I'm gonna get to fighting. I switched my stance and gripped my bat as hard as I can. I charged, running and screaming at this wolf thing. This may seem like a stupid death wish, but I was not about to die like a coward. The Dogman was about 50 yards away, tongue hanging out, drool flying around in its mouth. I could feel with each step I took the vibrating earth. I had to think quick. If I try to hit it in the head, I run the risk of it biting me or slashing me with its claws. So I decide I'm going to go with its hind legs. They're the smallest part. Then, just as soon as I had my plan, it jumped up and started running on its hind legs. 20 yards and closing. I only had one shot. I know I wouldn't kill it, but if I hurt it or stunned it enough, it would give me some time to get to my car and leave. I let out one final war cry and the beast roared, shaking my insides. The Dogman leaped for me. I swung my bat back and slid down on my knees and swung as hard as I could. I possibly could aim for the beast's left hind leg. Clack! I connected perfectly. I knew I had. It felt like I had just hit a 50-pound bowling ball. The force of the impact vibrated my bat in my hand so hard I dropped it, letting it fly out of my hands. I heard the beast bellow in pain. As it came to a stop, I quickly jumped up to look back at it. It was on all fours. It just stared at me with those hellish yellow eyes. Right then I knew I had made a mistake because now the beast is between me and the car. I cursed at myself for being so stupid, but at that moment, I dared not take my eyes off of it. As I knew for sure now, it was very upset, and it was really going to kill me. But to my surprise, it looked me up and down and just nodded, as if saying, you outsmarted me, you can live for another day. Or something like that. Then it hobbled off toward the forest, confused and stunned. I picked up the bat, ran to the car so fast I didn't think my feet hit the ground. I got to my car, started it, floored it the rest of the way home, white-knuckling the steering wheel, the motor screaming until I got to my road. I threw the bat in the grassy ditch and pulled into my driveway. I took a few minutes to collect myself and calm down before I headed into the house to face my family, trying to think of an excuse as to why I'm in this condition. Taking a long, heavy sigh, I get out and start heading toward my front door when I heard this long, blood-chilling howl. Until next time, I said, upon opening the door, my wife holding our 7-month-old son. She took one look at me and sat him down in the playpen and ran over to me. Oh my God, honey, what happened? Are you okay? Why are you so pale and sweaty? You look like you saw a ghost. I hit a dog on the way home, honey. It scared me. "Oh my God," she said, hugging me. "Are you okay? Did you kill it with your car?" she asked, looking worried, looking me over. "No, no, I didn't. I didn't even think I left a scratch on it." Today's third Ohio subscriber encounter. "Hey Jeff, my name's Jack. Feel free to use my name if you feel this encounter is worthy of your channel. I was an avid outdoorsman who loved to hunt and fish by myself, not so much since I found out what's really out in the woods. This particular encounter happened about 4 months ago. I was with my buddy, we'll call him Mac, at his cabin. It's located in a campground in Ohio. He's been staying there year round for at least 4 years now. The cabin consists of an RV with 3 rooms built around it, with a double deck outside the sunroom. Per rules, you can build, but you have to have an RV on the lot with the ability to hook up and pull it out if you have to. We first became aware of the presence of Dogman about 3 years ago and started to investigate further. We've had multiple sightings of 7 different individuals as well as several grassmen, Bigfoot. On this particular night, I had driven 45 minutes down there. It had been quiet outside all evening. We were having a spirited debate about several things. When I had had enough, I decided to head back home. It was getting late, 12 in the morning to be exact. I was walking by the monitor from the one outside camera when I heard a dogman's half growl, half bark, and it stopped me in my tracks. We both stayed silent, listening. Then we heard the familiar creak of the steps coming up to the door. Then the doorknob jiggled ever so slightly. We stayed motionless and silent. All at once, the floor under our feet rose up. One had gotten under the cabin part. Now we are starting to panic a little because they've never been so brazen. They have jumped up onto the roof before and thrown things at the cabin, but this was a lot more serious. So I went to the kitchen to peek through the curtain to check the back. We heard a noise outside of the bandroom window, which is opposite the room door. So Mac went to investigate. We met in the living room, and he's sweating and whiter than usual. He said he got on his knees and pulled up the blind in the sunroom, same side as the bandroom window, to see 2 large dogmen standing there. He said they didn't look at him, but stepped backward into the shadows. For the next 3.5 hours, we were silent, with me in the living room watching the door with my .357 mag cocked and ready for action. Max sat in the sunroom watching the sliding doors and out onto the deck with his .45. We could still hear them outside and still felt the floor raise up every once in a while, knowing one was still under there. Around 5 o'clock, I had to go home because I had to get my grandchild on the bus because my other half will be leaving for work. And it was my job to get the little one on the bus and make sure the other 2 were on the bus as well. So, in a state of absolute terror, where the fear turns to anger, he covered me while I pulled the curtains open in the living room and raised the window, and we both yelled out, "Come on, you son of a... Come and get some. We're tired of messing with you." Everything goes quiet. We waited a half an hour, then we went outside. I got to my truck and covered him as Mac walked around to the entrance under the cabin. The door was shut, and everything that was piled against it was put back in different places than they were, but put back nonetheless. Amazing how they had the wherewithal to do that. So I drove home freaked out the whole way, still terrified, and get the kids onto the bus just in time, and went to work. That was the scariest encounter I've had to date. Today's 4th part of the upload. Jeff, please don't use my name. This encounter is my brothers and I. It happened in late 80s or early 90s, I'm really not sure. It was the second day of deer season in southern Ohio. My brother had a 358 Win, I had a 308 Ruger, which you were not supposed to be hunting with. The farm we hunted on was rented by my dad's brother. I've hunted on this farm from 1966 when I had turned 13. The day had started early, like all deer hunts do for us, on a stand by 5:30. I was sitting on a fallen log with my back to the woods facing a freshly shelled cornfield. My brother was 50 to 60 yards to my right, sitting on a tree stump facing the same field. Around 10 in the morning, my brother started shooting, so I stepped out to maybe get a shot at a deer also. Only when I stepped out, it wasn't a deer my brother was shooting at, but what looked like a giant German shepherd charging at him on its hind legs. So I raised my rifle and shot, hitting it on the right shoulder, and the second shot hit it in the head. It fell down as it swiped at my brother. I ran down to where my brother lay. He had a slash on his left shoulder. I think his coat kept it from being worse. So we got to our Jeep, and I took him to our uncle's house and called the squad. When it came, so did the sheriff and the ODNR, because my aunt said it was a wild animal attack. I have a friend I knew at the ODNR that was hunting on another farm, and he arrived also. My brother went in the squad, and I took everyone back to look at what we described to look at. No one believed us, so seeing is believing, right? This thing we had shot looked like a werewolf. Long black hair like a wolf's, its belly fur was white, paws and fingers like a raccoon, only huge, with 3 to 4 inch long claws. Rear feet like a raccoon, only 15 inches long. Teeth like a giant dog or wolf, very muscular upper body, and the legs were not wolf-like in that way, more man-like. Like dog-like muzzle, pointed ears on the top of its head. My brother had shot it 4 times in the chest area. I had shot 2 times, once in the right shoulder area and the head shot. No one from the ODNR or sheriffs knew what it was, and they took tons of pics of it. It was before I had a cell phone and didn't have a camera. Asked my friend from the ODNR if he would get me and my brother some of the pics. He said yeah, and a few weeks later, I asked him about the pics, and he said none of them developed. This is what my brother told how this unfolded. He said he saw 3, what he said he thought were German shepherd dogs coming across the cornfield, kind of loping toward him. And he didn't give it too much thought because the neighbor had some dogs, but as they came closer, he noticed they were huge, so he started keeping a closer eye on them. He said they got maybe 100 to 125 yards, and they stopped. He said the larger one growled and looked like it was smiling or grinning. The other 2 started running to my brother's right, and the larger one stood up on its hind legs and charged. That's when he started shooting, and I came into the picture. They decided to wait till the next day to retrieve the body, so they left a new ODNR game warden there overnight. And all through the night he heard howls and shrieks, his words. He fell asleep later, and when he woke up sometime after 8, the body was gone. So nothing was ever done or said about it that I knew of ever again. Also, on the new ODNR guy's truck was a strange handprint on both doors. I've asked my now retired ODNR friend about the pics several times. Unusually, every time I see him, says he doesn't know what I'm talking about. Also, this thing looked like a werewolf in Van Helsing's movie, exactly like it. Brother's fine, just a giant scratch mark on his shoulders and chest. Can't hardly see them today, but give up hunting after that. I still hunt there to this day, but always take plenty of firepower and ammo. Me and him talk about it sometimes, but he won't talk to anyone else. And you are the only one I have ever told this story to other than my family. He sent some other little attached emails. Also, Jeff Brothers' injury was listed as a dog bite. It was the first day of gun season in Ohio. Second, the thing smelled really bad, like wet dog and roadkill. That was a few days old. Don't know if I said that before. Thanks for listening. Sorry, Jeff, old memory. Creature was around 7.5 foot tall. My brother also said when the first saw them, they were on all fours, but walked very odd, and also said when the big one charged on its hind legs, the other two ran off on all fours. Today's final subscriber, Ohio encounter. Jeff, I live in southern Ohio near the Ohio River. Myself and a few friends decided to explore an abandoned hospital that backed up to a giant hill, a large forest across the river in Maysville, Kentucky. It was a local spot for dumb teenagers to go and scare each other and play grab ass with their girlfriends. So running into other people wasn't uncommon, but you could usually tell if other people were there because there'd be cars parked near it. That being said, on this night, we were the only dumb teenagers there. The moment we got out of the car, though, everything felt wrong. We knew we weren't allowed to be here because the building was condemned, but this felt like we were in actual danger, which of course we always were. It was condemned, but it was different. Now, by this point, I had been to Hazelwood Hospital 20 times or so, and I was familiar with the layout. Once the three of us had gotten inside, we had been there for about 45 minutes when we split up to tag some different places and explore. I went to go take pictures of the morgue in the basement to see if I could photograph any orbs or any really cool stuff. I'd been in the morgue for about 10 minutes when I smelled the most foul smell I'd ever smelled. It was rotten. I don't know what it was that was rotten. I imagine it was the large dog or coyote, but all I could make out was it was 40 pounds of rotten meat. I just started to look at the meat chunk when I heard the slam of the steel door and what sounded like running through puddles of water, which meant whatever it was in the basement with me because the floor had about 3 inches of water standing in it. Naturally, I figured it was my friends playing a prank on me. That was when I decided to get them back and scare them before they scared me. Now, the way the morgue was set up, you could actually climb on top of the coolers they used to store the bodies. So I hopped up there and laid in wait to scare my friends. And I had been there no more than a minute when I heard screaming. Now, I've known my friends my entire life, which at this point had been 19 years. I've never heard screaming like this. The screaming stopped and I heard footprints running above me in what I can best describe as pounding. Now, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't freaked out a little, because this wasn't like my friends. It was usually hiding behind a corner or jumping out and saying, "Gotcha." This was different. This was dread I was feeling. As I continued to lie there, about 5 minutes passed when I heard panting and footsteps in the water. They were getting closer. That was when I smelled a wet dog, but it wasn't just a wet dog that I smelled. I was smelling the same rot as well. Then another steel door slammed, and I could tell it was the same door I passed before I got to the morgue doors. The panting was even louder now, and honestly, it sounded more like labored breathing and sniffing. Now, at this point, I'm terrified. I'm trying to slowly back away from the edge of the cooler I'm on so I can slip behind the wall the cooler backs up to and drop into the boiler room. To the end of the cooler when I heard the morgue door slam open and break tiles on the wall with the door handle. I'm less than 35 feet from whatever's panting and smelling like death, and all I can do is think, run, run, run. I could hear the sniffing, and then I heard the deepest, most menacing growl I'd ever heard. Movies and shows don't do this justice at just how deep and rough the growl is. It was sniffing me out. It actually was smelling where I had just been. I dropped down between the wall and the boiler room, and thank God the door that connected the morgue to it was blocked with old gurneys and a locker on its side, which I thought would stop this thing from getting in. I was wrong, so very wrong. I hadn't been in the boiler room for 30 seconds before I heard the pounding, scratching on the steel door. It sounded just like Freddy Krueger was trying to carve his way through that door. Then I heard the sound that still haunts me to this day. It howled, and it bellowed a howl so loud I had to cover my ears. Now, on the other side of the boiler room is the access to the generator and the dock doors trucks used to unload, and a hillside that led to the woods. When I reached the other side of the room, I could hear this thing slamming into the doors and knocking the lockers away and the gurneys. I opened the door to the dock room, and when I looked back, I saw the arm of this creature sticking through the opening it had made, and it was just like a horror movie. It was a gray and brown mass of fur, but it looked like a human arm, but it didn't because the hand was all wrong. It had 5 digits, but the claws would have made a bear run in fear. I slammed the door behind me and ran for the dock doors. The dock doors wouldn't budge, and I could hear the gurneys overturning and the lockers sliding on the floor. It was getting through, and the only thing between me and it now was a single door. I ran to one of the windows by the dock doors and proceeded to bust it out, which mangled my hand from the glass. Then, as I was pulling myself through the window, I heard the door slam into one of the hinges completely flew off the door and hit the wall. I tumbled out of the window and hit the cold, wet ground. When I stood up, I saw it in the doorway. Now I'm 6'4", 250. Not little by any means. And this thing took up the entire doorway, an 8-foot tall, 3-foot wide doorway. It was covered head to toe in grayish brown fur. It had a very narrow snout, almost like a Doberman Pinscher's, and its ears were just barely visible because of the doorway, but I could tell they were pointed, just like a dog's would have been. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, completely paralyzed. This thing was staring right into my soul, looking at every delicious part it was going to enjoy. I never felt like an item on the menu, but I can tell you it's terrifying. Then it snarled, and that woke me out of my disbelief of looking what I was looking at. I turned and ran. I ran up the hill into the woods to get around the hospital to get back to the street where the car was parked. I hadn't made it 25 feet when I heard it clawing to get out of the window. I knew I'd never make it to the car this way, so I ran back toward the hospital where the fire escape ladder was. I had used the ladder before to climb to the roof and take pictures of the entire town. I completely skipped the first 3 rungs of the ladder and was now inside the enclosed part of the fire escape. Again, this thing howled, and I could feel waves of pure terror filling my body. My hand's killing me at this point, and I was getting blood on everything. Just as I reached the first floor window I could climb into, this thing slammed into the fire escape ladder, knocking me down a couple rungs. It leapt onto the outside of the fire escape and began clawing at my feet. Just as I reached the window, I felt it, pain like nothing I'd ever felt before. It had grabbed just above my ankle and yanked, and, in doing so, shredded my boot and the end of my jeans and my flesh. I was able to pull myself into the first floor window, and I heard it push itself off the fire escape and head the way it came. Now at this point, I'm dragging my left leg and trying to keep my right hand in my hoodie. The entrance we came in is about 150 feet away down the main hallway. As I'm halfway down the hall, I hear the steel doors slam open again. I'm dragging myself down the hall, just trying to stay focused on getting out of here. Then the howling starts again, and I can hear it getting closer. I make the turn and hear the pounding coming up the stairs from the basement. I make it to the entrance and hear the padding of hands and feet on the floor. I made the mistake of looking back just as it rounded the corner and was running on all fours like a real dog. I bolted down the hill toward the street where the car was parked and realized the car was gone. They left me. My only way of escape is gone. I just zoned out and kept running down the hill. My leg is throbbing. My hand is in agony, and all I could think is, I'm gonna be doggy kibble. Finally, I make it to the first house I could find and ran full force into the door and began pounding on it like a crazy person. Thank God this little old lady was home, because she opened the door and I literally fell inside just before I kicked the door closed. Standing up on two legs at the end of her driveway was this creature. I broke down in tears. I didn't know what to do. Luckily, the old lady had called the police because a crazy person who was bleeding everywhere just fell into her home. When the cops got there, they asked me what happened. I told them the same thing I'm stating here, and of course they didn't believe me and thought I was on drugs. The EMTs took me to the hospital, and when they did blood work and found no substance in my stream system, they then concluded that I was attacked by a wild dog. I ended up with 36 stitches in my leg, 17 in my hand. I had to get rabies shots and tell the local wildlife officer my story. He informed me that they had reports of wild dog packs running around the outside of town, ransacking garbage cans and killing local pets. And I informed him that it was not a pack of wild dogs. It was a giant Dogman, but they all thought I was crazy. The only thing I had in my favor was the claw mark on my leg. Even the doctors were confused about how a wild dog could make a mark like that. Now, you know my encounter, and you know why I absolutely know why we are not at the top of the food chain. I've never been back to Hazelwood Hospital, and I've deterred anyone from going there. That experience has haunted me for the last 11 years of my life. It has made me into an overcautious man I am. I always have to know where every exit is when I walk into a building, and always know where large clumps of woods are. This experience changed me forever, and it changed the way I look at the world we live in. Just because we all haven't seen something doesn't mean they don't exist. It just means some people haven't been hunted for their life. I have no doubt what stalked me that night was a Dogman. I know that for a fact in my bones. All right, guys, I want to thank everybody for always tuning in and showing support. 5 terrifying subscriber Ohio encounters. Whew. I told you they were terrifying. With that, I want to thank you once again. I'd like to please encourage everyone to be kind to anybody who crosses your path. There's enough BS going on in this world today. We don't need to add to it. Also, may the Great Spirit watch over all of us, and may He guide us through our path in life. And with that, my friends, farewell.